We're staying with the mystical and setting up my son's January 2023 bullet journal with the theme of the divine eye. Let's get started. Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. My name is Beth and today is Planmas something or another. We are completely off schedule, but that is okay. We're just going to keep kicking out these videos as we can. Sometimes life gets in the way. So today we are setting up my son's bullet journal for January 2023. We went the tarot theme for his annual setup. We're going to stay in that mystical realm with a setup of the divine eye. Eyes are used in symbology all over the world, so the divine eye is sometimes called the all-seeing eye or even the eye of providence, which is the one that you would recognize most if you're an American and you look at the back of your dollar bill. From the Freemasons to Buddhism to the Illuminati, the eye seems to be everywhere. We are going to just go ahead and follow along with this triangle and eye situation like the eye of providence and follow that motif throughout this setup. If you saw my son's October 2022 setup, this might seem familiar as the eye also appears in his favorite podcast, The Magnus Archives. To draw eyes, I need circles, so here's my Helix Circle Maker, my favorite toy of all time, as well as some other circle stencils to help me out. And speaking of stencils, we are going to use one of my font stencils for this particular setup, and then I have a stencil that has just a lot of shapes on it. I will try to link these stencils for you down below, but I've bought most of them in large packs. And by now y'all know that Pigma Micron fine liners are a must. This time I do have a brush pen involved in the situation. It's going to run out on me and we're going to have to pinch it with something else. And then we're going to top off with some gold. Kenny asked for a black and white and gold theme, so we have some Uniball gel pens to help us out. And lastly, he wanted one color, which is green, so we picked out this Ohuhu marker after I swatched a bunch of green markers for him and let him choose the one that he liked the best. Here on the cover page, I'm going to start with this stencil, and I'm going to stencil in January as well as part of our quote. I'm going to try to keep you guys away from the stenciling for the rest of the video, as I've already put in some of those headers on subsequent pages. I do wait to color in our blocky stencil font until I can start seeing how other elements are going to show up on the page and where I think I'm going to need black or where I think I'm going to need gold. Those are the two colors I'm going to use for the headers. This sort of sage green is Ohuhu number 61. It and the rest of the supplies will be linked down in the description box below, because I am going to add in some more supplies as we go along to sort of fix some mistakes or just add a little more dimension in certain places. So while I am coloring in with this gold gel pen, I do have my Clearo watercolors on standby because we are going to top off all of the gold in this video with some shimmery paint. It really does make a big difference both on and off camera. For contrast, I'm now going to color in the rest of these block letters with black. This quote is from French poet Jean Laurent and it reads, "The madness of the eyes is the lure of the abyss." I felt like it was just mystical enough along with Kenny's current eye obsession to include in this setup. To frame our first eye, I am doing a series of triangles around the page. I did not want to copy the Eye of Providence 100%, but I did go ahead and detach the top of this particular middle pyramid. And then we're doing an upside down pyramid next to it. We're going to do some radiating lines that are in a triangle shape. And then here and there I have added in a moon and sun just to give us some other interest on the page. The triangles and the eyeballs were just not quite enough for me. I felt like we definitely needed something else. I do try to make sure though that that sun, moon, and the eye also form a triangle. I also didn't want to shoot for 100% realism with the eyes, but I did want to have certain elements on the eye to make them distinguishable. Those things being the pupil, the iris, the sclera, that's the white that's around the eye, as well as at least 2 highlights in every eye. My son is a very green-eyed boy, so it was no surprise to me that when he chose an accent color, it was a green that would mimic his own eye color. Once I have all these elements on the page, it really is like a coloring book where I'm just coloring in between the lines. Like the block lettering, during the sketching process, I had not decided what was going to get colored what color beyond the iris of the eyes. So this is all trial and error for me. Once I had the eye in place, I decided to color the triangle at the top of the pyramid gold, and then it was pretty obvious to me that the sun and the moon needed to be black for that contrast. The last step for this page is to create that dotted radiating triangle coming down from the eye, and then we're ready to add some shimmery paint. Now this is going to be the only page where I film myself adding the gold paint. It's gorgeous for sure, but I spend an extraordinary amount of time watching paint dry. So there is the shimmer on the word eyes. We're going to add that shimmer over here on the other page. You see it's not quite as shimmery when it's just the gold gel pen. So let's go ahead and make that super shimmery and gold, and then I will save the rest of the extra shimmery gold for the final flip through. That is it. That is Kenny's January cover page with the divine eye. Now I think this is mostly dry, but I'm going to go ahead and stick a little piece of paper in here just to make sure as we move on to the calendar spread. As I mentioned, I've already stenciled in our header. It is blank because again, I don't know what color I want it to be. And like many of my videos lately, I've gone ahead and put in all of the straight lines. The straight lines that aren't necessarily related to triangles, that is. For the additional elements on this page, I'm starting off with the Helix Circle Maker, doing some moon symbols down in the bottom. Kenny's trying to be a little more purposeful about knowing when the moon cycles are. And then I'm using the outside of that edge to create half an eye here on the top. Slowed things down a little bit for you so you can actually see in real time how long some of that tracing possibly takes me as I try to get this correct. It doesn't necessarily have to be right, it's just got to be close. One of the things I find interesting about this current eye obsession, and I've not told Kenny this unless he watches this video and finds out, but during high school and probably early college, I was a doodler. I had to doodle when I was taking notes in class, and in the margins of all of my notebooks are a number of doodles, and one of the things that I used to doodle over and over again was the eye. In addition to the large eye at the top, I am sketching out a smaller one here at the bottom, which is going to have a series of radiating triangles coming off of it. We certainly went all in on the eyes and the triangles, but those are the elements that keep this setup looking cohesive. One of the super great things about using a dot grid notebook in this particular instance is that the dots are absolutely your best friend. You can make any shape of triangle by connecting any 3 dots. And these radiating lines coming out of the eye are nothing more than very thin triangles, again finding a dot and connecting it into other spots. Now this is the moment when I realize that my Pigma Micron brush pen is on its last legs and it really does not want to give me any more ink. I am trying real hard to get it onto this header because I do want to write over it in gold. So now I'm either going to switch to this 1.0 graphic pen when I need to fill things in, or if I'm not going to write over top of it, I will use the watercolor based Tombow N15 because it is what I have close by. Sometimes things just don't go to plan despite your best efforts and you have to replace materials or you have to fix mistakes, and let me tell you, this is just the first of several in this video that I am going to have to either change supplies or correct a pretty big mistake that I have made. If you're super eagle-eyed, you might have already figured out that there's a big error on this page. I don't see it yet, but I will when I get there. In this setup, I am jumping around with supplies a little more than I like to. I normally do like to keep a singular tool in my hand as long as possible. So I'm going to go from coloring in this eye to filling out the dates on my calendar with the other end, the skinny end. And this is where I realized that I have 30 days in January instead of 31. And I don't have any space to add a 31st day. What will I do? Y'all, we're going to do the only thing that I can do at this point. We are going to finish numbering and then we are going to split that last square diagonally, and one of them will be 30 and one of them will be 31. I'm even recounting because now I'm second guessing how many days there should be in January. But I will do anything to avoid redesigning the bottom third of this page. I normally mark a couple of moon cycles on his setup for most months, but this time I actually did the full moon, new moon, last quarter, and first quarter, and added a little bit more information on what should be happening in your goal setting and that sort of thing during that time period. And then I added the week numbers in the eyes down the left column, as well as the days of the week, or at least the first initial of the days a week across the top. Again, if you want to see this with the gold shimmer, you'll have to wait for the flip through. We're definitely going to add it. Since I now know our cover page is completely dry, I am going to steal that piece of paper that is tucked behind this page and just move it forward one so that we can keep moving on to the next page. This is going to be a new spread for Kenny, both pages left and right. On the right, we're putting a notes page for the first time. He wanted to have a place to brain dump, but we both sort of hate that phrase. And on the left, we are going to do a small and very simple financial tracker. He has never used a financial tracker in his journal. This is going to be a very new setup for him. So we're starting off simple to see how much of it he uses or what he actually needs, and we'll modify it as we go through the year to suit his needs. Now, I didn't like the way that my Uniball gel pen performed when I was writing on the page before, and I've switched tools to the Secura Pen Touch Gold Paint Pen to kind of replace it. It has a finer tip. The thing with this paint pen is you've got to be very, very careful with it. It will pool, it is oil-based, it will seep through very quickly. But if you can get it performing correctly, and I'm going to use a post-it note here in a second, to just kind of test it and make sure it's writing correctly. When it's doing its thing, you can get a very fine point with that gold. Here I'm writing test. I like the way that it works, but it doesn't necessarily work out that way for me all the way through the setup. First the struggles with the black, now the struggles with the gold. It all works out in the end. While I was light-handed enough that the paint pen did not bleed through the page, the letters themselves were spreading just a little more than I liked, which means I probably should have just used the Uniball to begin with, but here is what that looks like. And then I did also bring in my N95 gray to highlight every other line. Even when I try to leave it off, I always end up coming back and adding that in. So on this finance page, we do have a spending log, which does have a spot for him to mark a date if something actually has a due date. Otherwise, he can just log items as he buys them on this column. He is trying to be more intentional about saving, so I added a small section there. And then we also added an earn section for him to record his paychecks. He is a barista at Starbucks, and some weeks he gets more hours than others. So we thought we'd started tracking it to see if we could find out an average of hours that he is getting every month or every 2 months. And then at the very bottom, he has got space to record his beginning and ending balances in both his checking and savings account at the beginning and the end of the month. With more of our thematic doodles on the page, and a sneaky one snuck in down there is the O for the notes, this is also a finished spread. I'm going to keep moving that black piece of paper forward so that we don't have any gold gel pen crossing from one page to the other, and move on to Kenny's weeks. If you are new to Dots and Beyond, my son Kenny has a very tiny handwriting, and we have landed on doing 2 weeks on a single spread for quite some time now. He uses these setups that have 8x8 boxes, and so I've gone ahead and sketched those in here so I could figure out where to put my illustrations. I was going to do black headers and gold writing on the top of each one of the daily boxes. After the fiasco on the page before, I was really weary of dealing with the black and gold combination, and so I have switched to the gray and the black. The other thing I don't necessarily love about the weeklies is that this particular stencil that I'm using for the font did not have any numbers included with it, and I had to pick a different stencil. I found that this one was too narrow. I really looked through all 48 letter stencils that I have, trying to find one that I felt like would work better. This is the one we landed on. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's just too starkly different. But now it's down on the page and we're not going to cover it up. We're just going to leave it there and go with it. For the illustration on this page, I basically have 2 identical setups, just one of them in one direction, and then I turned the other one upside down. My original plan was also to color every other one of these lines gold. So we're going to do the black and then skip one, and then the black and then skip one. I was going to do the gold on the interior of those, and by the time I got to this point, I felt like this whole video was pretty much a hot mess express, and I decided to just leave them white and just add a gold cap to the pyramid. And speaking of riding the hot mess express train, how about I just take this first week and completely number them wrong? No, Beth, the first Monday in January is not the first. It is the second. And y'all, this is the moment that I had to walk away. It's not a hard fix. We have things to help us fix these issues, but I had to step away for at least just a minute. And my solution was the quickest and easiest one that I have, and that was to cut a white post-it note and just on the sticky side, just on the sticky end of the white post-it note, and use these little pieces of white post-it note to cover up those numbers instead of covering up the whole row. And it's fine. Can you tell there's a mistake? Absolutely. Can you tell that it's been fixed? Sure, but it's been fixed. I totally second guessed myself on numbering week 3 as well, but you know, it is just what it is. We're gonna color in the rest of our coloring book here and then get ready to move on to the next week. It wasn't without its challenges, but week 2 and week 3 are done. They look fine. I'm overanalyzing everything, and that's just sometimes how I react to my creativity. We're going to move on to weeks 4 and 5 of January, and again, this is just a different configuration of 8x8 dot grid boxes. For the illustration on this one, I went back to a larger center illustration. We have a large triangle, a dotted triangle, and then again the eye and the sun and the moon in a triangle pattern as well. This video is running just a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and pop in the color here so I can go ahead and get these days of the week numbered, and we can move on to the final spread for this setup. Once those daily headers are in place, I'm just going to flip around that dual tip marker and use the brush end to fill in our eye. And the final touch on the illustration is to create this large gold triangle to tie the rest of them together. You know, we have almost made it to the end, and in Kenny's journal, we pretty much wrap up every month the same way, and that is with a playlist and a reflection page. Again, I have many of the straight lines already together, and this time I decided to create the same 8x8 boxes, but this time for his playlist songs. I do have to come in and add the triangles for a play button. We'll fill those in a little bit with some gold. But I had completely forgotten to sketch an illustration in this little spot above the word playlist. And so this time around, I am simply freehanding with the stencil and my pen and hoping that nothing goes wrong. Which, after the way that the rest of this video has gone, is quite bold of me if I do say so myself. As I'm coloring in these headers, it is another decision I wish I had rethought on whether I went back and forth between gold and black. I do like having the two different colors. However, I do think that the gold ones look a little cleaner, especially when I come back across them and retrace the outlines just to clean up the edges just a little bit. I think I really wish I had preferred or chosen to go with the gold all the way through. I also did a little something different here on the reflection page. This eye that I am creating is a little bit more wibbly wobbly, a lot less structured. It is based off an illustration that I just found on Google. Not 100%, that one was a lot more nuanced than this is. I did still stick with my black, white, gold, and green, but I do love the way that it turned out, and even with the squiggly lines, it still has that element of a triangle on top and a larger triangle on bottom. Kenny and I did agree that we are very far removed from the end of January when he's going to have to fill out this reflection page, and we're not quite sure what the categories in each quadrant of this page will be that he will reflect on for the month. So I'm going to go ahead and let him choose those and put those in when he's ready to put them in. Normally we fill out some things like ups or downs, what he did well, what he's proud of, but this time around I'm not going to pre-fill those. I'm just going to let him choose what he wants to reflect on this page when he is ready. I love this eye, but I did feel like a little something was missing, and the original illustration had some circles on it, so I did choose to recreate those as well, just filling them in with gold, not doing anything special with them. And I feel like they sort of have that vibe of the sun and the moon without actually being the sun and the moon. And now all I have to do is touch up all of our gold with some gold paint so that we can do this flip through. I did make two changes while I was waiting for gold paint to dry. I chose to add a gold drop shadow to the black font, which I'm not super happy about. It didn't come out the cleanest. And then, as I mentioned before, I did outline any of the gold font to make it pop just a little bit and clean up the edges. Other than that, I do really like the way that this setup turned out. Kenny's themes always have a way of challenging me because I'm never quite sure what he's going to come up with. And I love that he throws out the theme and then lets me run with it without a whole lot of direction, so I do get to play with that creativity. The gold paint really is an extra step, but I hope you can see how much of a difference it makes on the page. If you have made it this far in the video, please leave me a themed emoji down in the comments below. That could be a sun, a moon, a pyramid, or even a pair of eyes. And let me know if there is any sort of symbology that resonates with you. It could be a rune, it could be a symbol. It could even be a lucky number. Again, I'm going to let Kenny choose his own reflection categories, but that will be the wrap up of his 2023 January setup. It wasn't without its challenges, but sometimes things just don't go to plan. If you like this video, please go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. It definitely helps this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.